So one of the most basic surveying instruments we want to talk about is a compass. You've seen perhaps pictures of George Washington using a piece of equipment just like this. He was a surveyor on the side. That was part of his training. This is an original, 18th century one made in London. It's interesting, a lot of the European equipment was made out of brass. America, they ended up using a lot of wooden-based surveying instruments because brass was a very precious commodity. It took a lot of skill to make something like this. So very often when you see these, they're London marked or Paris marked, something like that. At any rate, you'll notice I have coming down here a plumb bob. Now, we were talking about the accuracy of surveys and everything. Very, very important, because when you start your measurements from this compass, you want to make sure that you're starting from the center of where the needle is, and gravity is taking this plumb bob and dropping it right to the center of the tripod. Right? So all my measurements will be taken from where this plumb bob basically touches the ground in terms of distance. Now what I want to do is look through here and I sight my vanes up with a prominent feature on the landscape, whether it be a corner of a farmer's field, or if we don't have the luxury of a large tree or something very prominent to look at, there is a second man out there with something called a ranging pole, and you'll still see these today on survey sites. It's basically a colored pole, and it's just something that somebody can hold and you can focus in on and say, okay, I know that that ranging pole is now at 23.5 degrees north-northwest, or whatever. Now, there's a couple different things you can do. Tedious but hyper accurate is to now take those chains that we talked about a second ago and measure from this point out to where the guy with the ranging pole is. And I can say, okay, we know the corner of that field beyond the shadow of a doubt is exactly 337 feet away, and we marked down on our little grid that it's at 22.5 degrees north-northwest. And then we'll go over here, we'll spin around, we'll look at another prominent feature on the landscape. There's the other corner of the field, mark down the degrees, measure out to it. So you write all this down in your book, and you take all these measurements. Now, if the chainman goes too far to the left or to the right as he's walking out to that ranging pole or the prominent feature on the landscape, that's why the surveyor is back here kind of focused in on him, and he can use hand signals and say, no, you went too far to the right, you went too far to the left. Because if you make a mistake, well, the farmer, A, is going to be pretty angry because you've just made his field too small, or maybe he'll try to pay you a little something on the side to make his field a little bit larger. But there was an oath, believe it or not, that they took at that time period in paper. It's called the Oath of the Chainman. And in signing this oath, he says, I promise that I'm not going to shortchange you, or I'm not going to increase your property if you, bribe me on the side. So it was a very dedicated set of professionals. So that's one way that you can use the compass. There is another piece of equipment we'll talk about next called a plane table that sort of revolutionized surveying to a certain degree.